I'm reminded of this famous quote, right, from Wanamaker, that half of my advertising spend is wasted. I just don't know which half.
Right, right.
It is so true even now,
Yeah.
Especially in B2B marketing.
Welcome to Speaking C-Suite, where today's CFOs have evolved from financial gatekeepers to strategic force multipliers, driving growth across the entire organization. I'm David Hemenway. I'm the host of the Angel Nest podcast, and I'm joined by Johnnie Walker from Rooled, outsourced CFO and accounting services. Rooled are the startup finance experts, and they are the driving force behind this series. Today, we welcome Kiran Hebbar. He's the Chief Financial Officer at Alloy, the leading identity decisioning and fraud prevention platform for financial institutions and fintechs since 2021. Kiran brings a blend of strategy, finance, product engineering, and investing expertise to high-growth startups. Previously, he served as CFO of mParticle, a customer data platform for enterprises, for over 3 years, and before that, he spent a decade as a general partner at venture firm Valhalla Partners, investing in early-stage B2B SaaS. Welcome, Kiran. Thanks for joining us today on Speaking C-Suite.
Thank you very much, David and Johnny. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much as well. And just before we get started on the actual interview and questions here, I just want to give another shout out to our 3 tech sponsors, which we greatly appreciate their support. That's really making this podcast series happen. They are all tech companies. They're all focused on finance and accounting. They all actually are at Series B stage as well. So I think they represent that kind of real momentum that we've got in the space for new tech platforms. First, Aleph, FP&A, they are really combining the power of flexibility of Excel with a much more robust data access framework. And so we use Aleph, and it's a fantastic platform. Really recommend taking a look at it. It's so quick to implement. You're up and running in 10 minutes. It's an amazing platform. Rooled, another one of the AI ERP platforms, and they've got a ton of potential. They now hold A16Z along with Sequoia as investors, and we're really excited for what's happening with that team. And third, Tabs, primary portfolio company, great friends of ours, AI agentic for revenue automation. They really focus on the contract as the main piece of data within a company and automate a lot of revenue automation around that. And they themselves also have a Lightspeed-led 55 million Series B. So all 3 companies, fantastic. Really appreciate their support.
Great. Well, today we're exploring the investor CFO bridge with Kiran. He spent over a decade evaluating finance leaders as a venture investor, and he now operates, of course, as CFO at Alloy, where he manages the economics of fraud prevention for 750 financial institutions. Kiran, could you walk us through how you translated the Alloy CEO's vision into something that was financially sustainable and an operating model that can serve both emerging fintechs as well as the established banks?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I joined in 2021, the first thing I did was to understand our CEO Tommy's vision, and it was, as he translated it, to create a more dynamic and accessible financial industry. And the mission was to really help financial companies deploy safe and seamless customer experiences. Okay, that's a lot. So the first step for me in 2021 was to translate that into strategy and operational elements. So the first thing I did was to put a strategic planning framework in place. The company before my time did not have a formal planning framework. And in a strategic planning framework, it starts with identifying 2 or 3 strategic pillars, meaning in order to translate your vision, what are the 2 or 3 big bets that we need to accomplish for this year? In that year, it was building our second product. So the first product that Alloy is always known for is the identity verification platform. And the second product that we wanted to build to fulfill his vision was an ongoing fraud, to prevent true fraud after a customer was onboarded by a bank. So that was one, and we had 2 other strategic priorities. So start from there, identify the big strategic priorities, and then my job was to distill it down into, okay, what are the individual functional plans? What does sales have to do? What does marketing have to do? Post-sales implementation, biz ops, people ops, finance, etc., etc. And then build a 3-year financial plan to say that, look, if we achieve everything that the CEO's vision that the CEO wants to achieve and all of us want to achieve, then it translates to these financial numbers, these growth numbers, these margin numbers, these OPEX numbers, these cash burn numbers, and so on. And okay, so once we had all of this, then to build measurement systems, how would we know that we're making progress on maybe a product, maybe some other customer areas? So, defining all those KPIs that would show us that we are moving along in that vision or not, and implement it. And then the last thing is communicate. That's what I do a lot. And my stakeholders are both the employees, where the employees completely understand the CEO's vision, but they want to say that, okay, how does it translate into numbers? How would we know that we are successful? So communicating that the company is on a path to hitting these ARRs, at this NDR and GDR, these efficiency numbers. And then the second stakeholder is the board. Always communicate, explain how it ties to vision, how it improves enterprise value. That's my main job, to improve enterprise value for a company. So anyway, long story short, that's how, the whole process of translating the CEO's vision into actual operational plan and a financial plan that we could execute over the next 4 years.
Great. Actually, I will come back to the metrics side because I think that's a particularly interesting component of it all. But just when you looked, and you mentioned sales in there as a department that had to contribute to the planning process, and you had financial goals. When you look at was the monetization of the product kind of clear at that point? Or because you've got this B2B focus, you've got obviously an extremely important, especially so in today's world, product or service that you're providing to fintech customers. How did the monetization or the understanding of what the market would bear as pricing, how did that work? Because that, I think for a lot of people, a lot of companies, that's very murky, and I presume was maybe murky for you guys too. Like, how do you think about getting clarity in that kind of area?
Yes, so it's very murky, you're right, Johnny, but you have to run it as an experiment. So the approach we took was, we already had some customers that were using our product for fraud cases. So we had some idea of what the market was willing to bear. But the strategic bet was to scale it and to see if it's just a few customers that were interested, or was it, like we believed, a multiple an exponential increase of our TAM because a large swath of the market wanted it, kind of thing. So the way we approached it was to say that let's try with this particular pricing. It was a new concept for us where we were now pricing transactions. So in order to detect fraud, our approach was to bring in lots of elements, identity, logins, transactions. Now, the more transactions we bring into our system, the better the signals we get. And so the pricing element was, should we charge on the transactions or something else? Anyway, for the sales team, what we incented them on was to more get accounts in a certain range and give them a lot of spiffs, what we call, extra incentive compensation for just bringing these key accounts. And the other thing that I give credit to my colleagues was they started what is known as a core innovation group. A core innovation group means once you sell this product to a customer, you bring in people from implementation, sales, product to kind of get them implemented fast and then discover what the true pricing should be for the next customer, what are the new features and so on. So it took, I would say, a good 12 to 18 months to really nail this. But I'm very glad we followed this approach, because if we had hired 20 salespeople and said that go get the market, we'd never have learned quickly on what the market was telling us. So it was both an efficient growth kind of a mechanism and also brought us a lot of success.
I understood. I think that's a terrific. I love the term that you gave to it there, or your company gave to it, the core innovation group, because it matters so much. You've got to get the product actually used. You can do the sale, but in order to actually get an understanding of what needs to happen with the product, feature-wise, etc., you actually have to have the thing in use. And we know we certainly see a bunch of companies that sell something and then there's not the actual customer usage of it. There should be a lot of focus on the upfront implementation for definite.
Right. They call it shelfware, right? You know, people buy because the
Yeah.
sellers were amazing at wining and dining,
Yeah.
and this software just sits on the shelf. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not alloy.
Totally,
It's
totally.
used.
Kiran, I'm curious, when you're experimenting with pricing, how do you decide what a big enough sample size is?
It's again a great question. You initially don't decide on what the sample size is. You kind of let the market tell you. So see, the market is not just one market. There are different segments of the market. Let me give you an example. You know, if you just go after banks, there's the largest banks, the enterprise banks. There's regional banks, credit unions. Each one has a different buying and consumption pattern, and each one has its own willingness to pay. So the experiment we ran said that we wanted a sufficient number of maybe 2 credit unions, 2 regional banks, a sampling of what we thought was our core market. And once we found repeatability, like, you know, one credit union was willing to pay a lot. And we deployed a lot of resources against it to make sure, like Johnny said, that the implementation went well. And once we got that right, we knew that other customers that looked up to this bank will follow, and so on. So, yeah.
I'm also curious about R&D expenditures. How do you partner with the CTO to evaluate that? I mean, because you're spending money on things that may not show any profit for years.
Right. I would include our chief product officer as well. So it's a collaboration between our CTO, CPO, and me. The first step is, at least for me, to really understand the product roadmap that we're building and break it down into themes. And I'll explain what that means. Some are to sustain current customers. So, for example, maybe we have, like we said in the last example, 5 samples set for our new ongoing fraud, right? And there we need a certain amount of investment to keep discovering what the market wants and dedicate certain resources to that. That's one area. The second is, as you mentioned, we have 700 plus customers. To sustain them, their constant feature requests, scaling them, because that's existing revenue. We can't lose that. So that's another bucket. Then we have just scaling of platform, maturing our platform, spending on bug fixes, triages, etc. That's one. And then we have a fourth category, which we call bets. We don't know if the market wants, but we'll reserve a limited amount of resources and we'll go about in a very methodical way. Like I said, you know, try with a couple, see what they say, put a core innovation group against it, learn, and so on. And then we put tooling behind it. There's a great tool that helps us measure how much resources is going into each of these buckets and how is it scaling. Are we scaling up, scaling down certain, some of these things? So that's one. Again, communicating, taking that, helping our CPO and CTO communicate this to the board. And once the board understands this, they're like, yeah, this makes complete sense. It's not as if you're completely throwing R&D at all these bets, which has no revenue. So they'll say that, okay, only 10 to 15% is on these bets. That's fine. That is a completely reasonable plan, and so on. The other is we're investing a lot in AI, like many companies are. And that's costing a lot of compute resources. So my job is I team up with the CTO to work with his DevOps team to understand where is it going, you know, AWS, databases, some AI workloads, etc. And my, collaboration with them is to optimize it as much as possible, minimize costs till we see revenue coming. Revenue will come at some point. We don't need it now. We need a lot of customers to adopt it and love it, and then we will start charging potentially. But at this moment, just to optimize as much as we can, kind of a thing. So it's that approach that I take with our CTO and CPO.
Great. So actually, a couple of things there. One, because you mentioned metrics before, and I think you referred there to a platform. Does that platform that you use, do the metrics for measuring the progress, the performance of the R&D sort of resource allocation, does that come out of that platform as well, or how do you come up with the metrics?
Yeah, so just for the engineering metrics, this platform measures Jira tickets and how much of effort and resources are going against each of these buckets that you categorize. So it helps with, So engineering and product, they have their own like measures, right? Lots and lots of measures of progress. But an executive or the board doesn't really understand this. And the tool that I'm mentioning helps break it down into business terms. How much is going to platform scaling, new features, existing customers, et cetera, and then present it. So you can the product and engineering team can tell a story on how engineering expenses are. Right now there might be a spike, but it's going to go down over time. Here's why.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And so
it's more like a Salesforce for engineering
right.
kind of a thing. Executive dashboard. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I like the reference there to the business sort of perspective on it, as opposed to development orientation perspective.
Right.
It's about you've got these core features that you're moving towards, and you want that effort or resource measured against those core four. So just you mentioned AI there. How one of the dynamics we're seeing in the industry is because of the usage of the AI resource, let's call it that, is just so transparent now that you get billed from a cost side, you get billed on it, tokens consumed, et cetera. Do you see that as feeding through into your pricing model? Because there's real sort of like linkage between the cost that you incur for the AI being used by a customer as part of executing on the platform. Do you see the pricing model evolve perhaps with that?
It will evolve at some point, but at the moment, we do want to so this is a highly regulated industry, and banks won't like just jump into a new fancy tool unless they see that there is a material difference in controlling fraud. So our first mission and goal is to make sure that the flavor of AI that we are promoting will actually help them solve fraud. And we have two things there. One is called Fraud Attack Radar that we developed. And what Fraud Attack Radar does is, if a bank is in the process of being under a fraud attack, this system can capture it and tell them before their internal systems can, because of all the AI tools. And so then the bank can quickly jump in and take some actions, ask new applicants to provide additional verifications and so on and so forth. That's one. Second is we have something called entity fraud model, where any entity that the bank or the fintech is trying to onboard, whether it's a consumer or a business, we can score and say that, this person has a higher propensity to commit fraud based on a bunch of things. So these are very, very relevant. So going back to your question, using LLMs and tokens and incurring costs, that is a third product we are experimenting with in order to improve the efficiency of humans on the bank side who are like taking compliance decisions. So at the moment, the cost is not an issue, but once costs come up, at some point we'll start about monetizing it and revenue. And so
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Kiran, let's talk about the customer experience a little bit, because in fraud prevention, you're always kind of balancing that against risk mitigation, right? How do you work with your CMO and any customer success teams to measure the financial impact of the friction that customers get when they're dealing with security issues?
Yes. And the customers will ask us the same question. So what we have done is we've worked with both our product and design teams. They're front and center in designing that experience, the Alloy experience, as well as the marketing team and CMO. But first step is to analyze all the benefits of fraud prevention. First is, of course, preventing the cost of fraud, people stealing money. In fact, Alloy did a state of scam report, just released the state of scam report that says that for most consumers, the number one thing that prevents them from picking one bank over the other, it's not fees, it's not customer support, it is their fraud control and security. So it's come up to the top. And there's another thing that we released that, I think 6 out of 10 Americans have been scammed or know somebody who's scammed. And among those who are scammed, 1 in 5 lost at least 5,000. Anyway, it's a big problem, as we know. So it's a product and design challenge. And for finance, it's translating loss of fraud, as well as for many banks, fraud is preventing their growth. Because there's fraud, they can't acquire as many customers as they want, which is really a revenue hit, not just a cost hit. And that is a bigger challenge for many banks and fintechs. The third thing is more automation through our Alloy system means less money invested in humans and all the cost of it. So we have an ROI calculator that puts all of it. It gives it to our salespeople and so on. The other thing on the CS side, we've done certain things. So in order to measure the health of our customers, we built a comprehensive health scoring mechanism that says, like, are you under a fraud attack? Is your usage increasing tremendously? Or is your usage not there at all? Are you using X many data sources to solve fraud, etc.? So that our CSMs can get a green, yellow, red state on our customers, which translates from their experience, the experiences they're giving, so that they can stay ahead of fraud. They can talk to our customers and help them solve it and so on. So it's like a multi-pronged approach between both CS as well as our product design teams.
Yeah. And how, from a finance perspective, is there like a rubric or something that you use as a model for determining the investment or consequences on the finance side, or is that, how close does that come to the kind of money management side, if you like?
Yeah, there is. I would say there is a finance calculator, like an ROI calculator, primarily for our sales and post-sales team.
Yeah.
When they are convincing end customers why they should use Alloy, how Alloy can prevent it, and so on and so forth. Internally, we are not hit by fraud, thankfully. Yeah. We have a lot of controls inside. So inside, it's not that big an issue for me to manage my own team or the company's finances, if
Good.
that was your question.
No, that's great. No, yeah, thank you.
So I'm curious to talk about marketing and how you work with CMOs, because you work with banks at both ends of the spectrum, right? Scrappy fintechs, Fortune 500 banks, and their customer acquisition costs and sales cycles are dramatically different, as well as their tolerance for investment, probably, right?
Right. Yeah. There was, I'll answer that question, but I'm reminded of this famous quote, right, from Wanamaker, that half of my advertising spend is wasted. I just don't know which half.
Right.
It is so true even now, especially in B2B marketing.
Now, Kiran, digital was supposed to change all that.
Digital was supposed to change, but the measurement systems are not that great. And in B2B, what's happening is it's multi-touch, multi-channel, working in a complex way to bring in deals. That means, our marketing team has they put out the surveys that I mentioned, state of scam survey, state of fraud survey, that increases brand, increases engagement. There's content, there's blogs, there's digital, paid digital, it's SEOs. Events are a big thing for us, and so on and so forth. There's a lot. Word of mouth, investors. So all of this work in conjunction to bring in deals. Now, it's different, like you said, David, for fintechs on one side, it's completely different. For banks, it's a different strategy. So the way I work with our CMO, who's excellent, is to measure everything. That's one, put in systems to measure everything. And treat certain areas as pure experiments, meaning in an experimental phase, I don't mind putting dollars. So for example, we said, let's experiment with paid media as a channel to acquiring either the fintechs or the banks. Let's see if it works. So I allocated X dollars. We said it's a 6-month experiment. We'll run across Google, LinkedIn, everything, and then we'll measure. So for us, it's like, okay, that was very revealing. And I said, okay, at the end of 6 months, we'll develop more conviction. Either this is not working or certain segments work for certain channels work for certain segments and we increase dollars and so on. So there's a constant experimentation culture that we have. Just to answer your question completely, banks are very events and webinars, content oriented. Fintechs are very much a founder to founder events, of course, like, specific types of fintech events, etc. So there's that. So we manage, and then we also started in the UK. UK is different, So you constantly have to manage this budget. And for me, it's just managing what we call this programmatic budget. Should it be, 5 million? Should it be 10 million? And the thinking is experiment, 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 cut this, increase this. We are constantly, iterating.
And I guess there's like some sort of channels that, you can treat as relatively reliable. So a little bit like recurring revenue. And we've actually got some interviewees coming up who focus on the customer success portion, the chief customer officer. And they've already talked to me about how the importance of their business or segment to the CFO is that this is money that's coming in. And, it's there to manage, it's there to keep. And so I guess you've got these channels in the marketing side that you kind of maybe don't treat as low risk, but it's much more dependable. And then you've got this portion that, as you're saying, you're devoting to experimentation to try and increase overall the optimum amount of result or value from the investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, for banks, events we throw very good events, banking summit, and there we do roundtables. They learn from each other. Prospects learn from others. That's very valuable. And we don't have to do anything other than bring them together and serve content and some knowledge sharing.
I mean, and that model, I think, applies obviously at your level. I mean, it applies, frankly, at our level as well. Like the way that we engage with our market is through that almost founder-to-founder type relationship. But it's about bringing people together to talk about common interests, common difficulties, and just people get value from that. And I think really 100%. They can take it home and they go right into their company with it.
Yeah. And especially after the pandemic, people just want to get out and meet in person. Yeah. That's true.
Totally true.
Yeah. And it's brilliant when you can introduce some of your raving fans to your new prospects, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's all. We don't have to do anything. Just let them talk.
Right. Exactly.
That's great. So you're scaling up, which is terrific, and you need to serve more and more customers. I'm curious how you work with people leadership to plan headcount compensation so that you can attract, top talent. It's a very competitive market, right? And it's always a challenge.
Yeah, I would say, David, that people is my closest collaborator at Alloy. And the reason is because, first of all, people, finance ops and people ops are so integrated, in payroll, benefits management, headcount, all of that. But from a strategy perspective, we want to create a high performance culture. And in order to maintain a high performance culture, our hiring standards have to be just incredibly good. You cannot compromise on hiring because, once you hire these A people, they only want to work with A people. If there's a B person, they're like, we are putting them at risk. And anyway, so my CPO, me, and the CEO are the three approvers for every headcount. And both of us, my CPO and me, we read every scorecard for every hire that's made, just to make sure that people are maintaining a very high standard. Then the second thing is compensation philosophy. So we have a particular type of philosophy where we are optimizing for long-term wealth. For example, 401k match is a very standard thing we do. So things like that, very collaborative with our CPO. And if they want to promote a certain type of benefit for a particular year, I already know that, okay, that's aligned with our thinking. Scaling of systems. As I am scaling finance and accounting systems to keep up with our growth, similarly, our CPO is scaling our, like we implemented Rippling, which is very good, and then other compensation systems and, moving our 401k to a scaled provider, etc. So these two things happen in parallel. The last thing I would say is, for me, I have this, like many CFOs, we have this continuous forecasting. Like, are we doing well? Should we increase our burn? Should we increase our hiring? Because we are forecasting that our revenue will be great. Or the other way, I'm forecasting some headwinds. So should we slow down, etc. So the collaboration with our chief people officer is so great that I can immediately say, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Or, hey, you should hire more. Maybe you should hire a temporary recruiter so that we fill all this headcount because we are forecasting a really great quarter or great 2 quarters.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So actually, just to pick up on that forecasting one, because that Is part of that, I presume, is like a rigorous finance-based forecast that relies
Yes.
upon a month close, and you see the numbers, and that probably is the best indicator of cash burn. Do you use
Yes.
any sort of intra-month indicators, more real-time, that you can sort of extrapolate from there to a consequent financial impact? Is there any way that you manage things on a more sort of fine granular basis than on a monthly
Yes.
close cycle? I'd be interested to hear how you've tackled that.
Yes, we do. And that's because, on the sales side, on the booking side of things, we have Clary, and there's a weekly forecast that's put out via Clary by our revenue organization. So that gives us an idea of how we are trending on a weekly basis on ARR bookings for the quarter. Revenue is more of a recognition thing, but Alloy also has a uncommitted usage, like a consumption, that is hard to predict.
Yeah.
So we just have to assume a range. But cash forecasting is last 4 years, I've really focused on expense and cash forecasting on almost a real-time basis. Because in my experience, even being a board member for 10 years when I was a VC, boards will tolerate a miss on revenue and bookings. They will tolerate it because, we are high growth. They will not tolerate a miss on expense or cash burn.
Yep.
You cannot walk into a board meeting and say, we'll miss our burn by 30% and we'll probably run out of cash. We need emergency funding. That's reason for me to be fired on the spot.
Yeah. That's a great way to describe it, actually. I completely agree with you. The experience is that the revenue projection is a lot less, clearly, it has to be. It's a lot less sort of something you can rely upon. But expense, you have to manage that to the cent, definitely.
Right. And really helpful, right, that you were on the other side of the table for so long as an investor. Of course, as an investor, when I hear cash burn, I think about investors, right, because that's where we're going. That's where it's going next. And, I'm just curious, have you seen a lot of disconnects between what investors expect from CFOs and what the CFOs actually need to deliver in order to provide the best product and service?
Not so much a disconnect, but there is something that I wish every board did better when they picked a CFO. Two things, actually. One is evaluate the CFO's cross-functional skills. Because, the CFO really, or at least I, viewed myself as 10 years in a VC role. I really wanted to go into the operating side, pick one problem, one founder, and go deep and solve like cross-functional problems. So the ability to solve cross-functional problems, meaning have knowledge about sales capacity planning, post-sales staffing, NDR, GDR, churn, etc., long list, marketing, like I mentioned, product, is really a superpower if you can find. So that is one, if they can really interview CFOs for that skill. The second is, if they can do a real personality and culture test to see if the CEO and CFO are a great fit. Because if they're a great fit, they see eye to eye, it's like a force multiplier. I've been very lucky to work with Tommy, our CEO, but it's just, it's just a matter of luck. It needs to be a more organized process, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific way to highlight it there, though, I think, Kiran, because that cross-functional, it's really having... if we look back, however many years you kind of assume, 15, 20 years, whatever, the role of the CFO was much more, I think, insular. Like they were really focused on the finance department. And there was a clear focus on, compliance and sort of reporting and accuracy and whatever. But now, I think to your point, the best CFOs are people who really have an understanding or appreciation that spans across the company, and they can work with these different departments. They have a clear understanding of how sales actually generates leads, bookings, etc., all the way through, and they can converse with it. You get an awful lot. Well, I guess it's just crucial now. You have to do that if you're going to be a high-performing CFO. Right.
And then what comes as a natural corollary to that is you have to be a good people leader. Because if you don't have any people skills, you won't be able to have this cross-functional impact. Sales will say, you don't know much, just stay away from me, or marketing or whatnot. And so you need to be able to work with them, inspire them, mentor them.
Well, and actually we had Cassie, as you probably know, as our first inaugural episode. And Cassie was saying wonderfully that she recommends everybody take your CFO out to lunch, get to know them, make them get a relationship with them, because they're your key source of knowledge and value on the finance side, and they're a key partner for you. So I think that just kind of embodies what you're describing there as well.
Yeah. And when you talk about communication, it's really interesting with investors, because you have a very complex value proposition, right? You got 200 plus data sources, you got AI algorithms, regulatory compliance. Do most investors really understand the economics of fraud prevention?
Most casual investors do not, but those in this space specialized, and they understand it intuitively. But our responsibility, David, our meaning, our executives, CEO, me, is to break it down into 3 or 4 things that every investor has like a templatized understanding. One is, what is the business value? Why is the customer buying this? Okay, so start with that. Our fraud prevention, whatever the details are, is helping them prevent fraud losses, helping them grow their revenues by X%, and reducing the cost of serving onboarding accounts, because there's less humans involved, they're more efficient, less engineering time, something like that, right? Now, let's say, okay, fine, but why is it a problem I should care about? It's a super large TAM. Here's the TAM, 5 billion and growing. And as you have seen, fraud is increasing by the day, etc. Okay, then break it down into, okay, I got it. Alloy is the most unique product because of XYZ. Why is there a moat? Why will we be we were one product, now we are 3 products. Why is there an innovative machinery that will always keep the moat? And then why is this team the best qualified to address the problem? That's it. That's all and then what the investor will do is they will talk to other people, like potentially competitors, potentially partners, so that when a competitor says, aha, they don't have this, the investor can say, but I think they do, because this is what they do. So my job is to simplify it as much as possible in these terms, business, TAM, product, team.
And you talked about how investors and CEOs ought to be looking for cross-functional CFOs, right? And CFOs that can communicate. What else should investors be looking for as they look to evaluate the CFO function?
Right. So if the question is, how can they be more confident that the CFO's office is a competent, one? Once they evaluate the CFO, the personality, all of that I mentioned, skills, they need to focus on a few metrics that gives an indicator of health of the close timing. Can this team, your team CFO, can they consistently close the books in whatever, 5 to 10 business days? Okay, why is that important? That gives an indicator that it's a healthy operation. Whatever accounting is doing, they're not scrambling to get data from all over. It is like a smooth operation. That's good. Data hygiene and insights. Look at the quality of cross-functional insights that comes from this team. Ask for the reports that this team sends to the implementation team or the sales team or the marketing team. Do they know how to calculate CAC payback and S&M magic ratios and explain why that is important to a team? The next thing is proactive forecasting skills, meaning first they're proactive and they know how to forecast. An investor comes and says, what will happen in the next 2 quarters? The team can put a forecast and explain why why margins will improve, or why certain benchmarks, OPEX benchmarks, R&D benchmarks as a percentage of revenue, why will it keep decreasing? All of that, they should have the ability to explain to an investor. And the last thing I would say is examine the tools that they've implemented for scaling. And does this give confidence that this is a team that can carry this company for the next 3-4 years, because they have all these things.
Yeah.
So.
And actually, another example there, because one of the companies that we worked with was, Truebill, which then became Rocket Money, and Arun Mokhtarzada. I worked with him directly, and he attributed a lot of I don't know, maybe not power, but sort of the what he had in the boardroom in terms of trust from the investors did come a lot from the fact that we had a very reliable financial forecast, so that he could say, if I put this amount of money into marketing at this point here, I can pretty much say definitely what's going to happen on the revenue side. And so that, of course, leads through to the cash burn, et cetera, whatever. So he really had this very, like, we could forecast things out and we were very reliable at it. And he said that imbued him with a lot of trust in the boardroom. And so if he asserted something or had like an opinion about it, the investors are much more likely to trust what he said out the gate rather than having to question it. So I think there was a lot of power came from that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a trust game. You know, my role is to build so much trust between the board and the company that I can harness the board's great wisdom and great ability to help the company. You know, that's my goal. But also, you know, I believe in just hiring like incredibly talented people. I don't believe in a large team in finance, but if you hire really good people, they can get all of this done with some tools and so on.
Just, and I know we're coming up towards the end of time here. Just, you mentioned platforms and tools there, which of course we spend a lot of time looking at. It's a very vibrant sector of our industry right now. What would you, you know, your top 2 or 3 highlights in the way you think about tools that can help you scale the company in CFO tech, in finance and accounting? How are you thinking about that whole sort of rather diverse set of things happening right now?
Yeah, it's very unique to your business, but for our business, on the accounting side, getting a really good general ledger that keeps up with us. And you mentioned Rooled is very good, you know, Campfire, there are lots of them. We're with NetSuite because, you know, we moved from QuickBooks to NetSuite just about 12 months ago, but really great tools. For us, billing has been a challenge because we are, like I mentioned, a consumption model. So there is measurement of units from our production database that goes into Snowflake. And then there are lots of scripts that gets pumped. And because of our usage model, ASC 606 variable consideration is a complex one for us. So we implemented a new tool there as well. And then, accounting implemented Flowcast for closing, you know, Avalara for sales tax, a number of these tools just to make their lives easier and easier. On the strategic finance side of things, we have a cash forecasting tool, which has some AI ability that seems to be very promising. So I'm like experimenting with all kinds of tools. If you have some wonderful ones, we will experiment. We will come up with an opinion and decide whether to implement it or not.
Love it. No, I'd love to continue that part of the conversation. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, the innovation's just happening at an amazing pace. I'm curious, Kiran, how your experience as an investor has helped you in your current role.
One is I'm more even-keeled because, you know, during my 10 years, I saw the worst of shutdowns and the best of companies. I've seen all of it. So there's one. Second is I have a lot of empathy for the founders and the grind that they go through on a day-to-day basis and how emotionally challenging it is. You know, some days are great, some days are not that great, etc. So I have more of as a VC, you know, my fault, I did not have that much. I didn't have that appreciation. Now on this side, I do. I know how to manage the board well through thick or thin, and that is my value to the CEO. So the CEO can focus on their superpowers, which is usually something about the product, the market, the vision, and so on and so forth. So it's made me a better CFO.
Fabulous. Kiran Hebbar, Chief Financial Officer at Alloy. Thanks so much for joining us for some really insightful conversation.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun.
All right.
Thank you, Kiran.
Johnnie Walker from Rooled, congratulations. What's been an amazing episode here, and I know we have some great stuff lined up, so looking forward to the next installments.
Very much so.
All right, this has been Speaking C-Suite, exploring how finance leaders can become true strategic partners and drive growth across their companies. Check us out on YouTube and all the major podcast platforms. I'm David Hemenway, the founder of the Angel Nest podcast, where we've also done many other episodes in partnership with Johnnie Walker and Rooled, so you can hear more of those at theangelnest.com. Thanks for tuning in. So long until next time.
Thank you.